to crypto-clothesline. We're glad to be here with you. Hanging out the crypto laundry. Getting all the crypto info for you. Crypto-clothesline.
Good evening, Amy Rose.
Hello, and it's an evening tonight that we're chatting.
Well, we have had some recording challenges today. I think it's okay to share that with the listeners.
I don't know. You're a family daycare lady. You know about children not sleeping, particularly mine, because you were my first child's family daycare mum, and that particular child, my offspring, still refuses to sleep. So anyway, 7 years later.
It must be something genetic, hey? And in my household, you can probably hear the thumping of something very loud in the background, and I apologize to everyone. We've got a very busy household, and for some reason today, there was a lot of movement at the front door, closing, opening, knocking, banging, falling, hurting, all of those sorts of things. So yeah, I couldn't do much recording today either.
First world problems.
I swear. And as we said before in our first interview introduction with Lyn Ulbricht, when you hear about Ross's story, everything is relative. It's not so bad.
Well, that's absolutely true. And I think last week we covered a lot of how Ross Ulbricht's life is being impacted. This week we're going to talk about the family life of Lyn Ulbricht and Ross's situation in prison and how we are able to help.
It was an interesting conversation because, to throw it into context, I think it was my question I was asking, like, what toll did this take on your family life? And she mentions it being financial, psychological, and emotional. And the combination of those three, in my words, I'm thinking it must be like a sort of a family Molotov cocktail. And one of the things that we talk about in our presentation about the crypto clothesline and crypto and kids and why we bring this to women is the whole notion that financial stress in a regular relationship is one of the leading causes of divorce and family breakdown. And if you add to that emotional and psychological from having a son in prison with a double life sentence plus 40, you can only imagine how painful and frustrating and saddening all of that must be. And even those adjectives feel like they don't even really get close to the core of how it must feel.
Well, she also mentioned how vulnerable she feels and also how she's used her own gifts.
There is a great quote here that I have of hers, and she says, I do have a big mouth, which is finally going to some good use. And, you know, I'm educated. A lot of the people who are in there, they're not educated. So she talks about the fact that her communication skills and her lack of fear in speaking out are actually coming into good play in this situation.
It feels as if she's in like a pressure cooker. And she does speak about how her heart actually gave out, how she was physically shaken. She went to hospital and she does speak about that. And I just don't think that without the support networks of her friends and her family and people who are influencers in the crypto space, that this whole Free Ross campaign would be able to sustain itself, because people are signing this petition, but also people are providing community services and volunteering to help in the whole campaign.
I think it's a great point to let listeners know where they can find the petition.
freeross.org.
And there's a button there saying petition, so you can just go straight through and sign the petition and then share. So sign and share, and encourage other people to do the same. As we mentioned last week, they are looking to gather 500,000 signatures, and they're just up over the 100th way.
If it wasn't for the influencers who are in this space who are also supporting, and one of those supporters is Roger Ver, and we had a conversation with him about his involvement in the Free Ross campaign and his thoughts on freedom and human rights.
It was a pretty enlightening conversation with Roger. In the interview, Lyn also speaks about Eric Voorhees, I think that's how we say his name, from Shapeshift, and she also mentioned Charlie Lee of Litecoin, who went in, supported him and saw him in prison. So you're exactly right that support from people within the community has been really positive, and Ross although, you wouldn't call him a fortunate person for the situation that he's in, but he has got a lot of people who seem to have his back.
Well, he does, because I think there's a lot of people out there who are voluntarists, and I think we covered that a little bit in our interview with Roger Ver, but Silk Road had rules. So basically anything that was not voluntary was not allowed. So Lyn talked about child pornography and rape and all those sorts of things. Those sorts of things weren't on Silk Road. So anything that was on there are things that people voluntarily went about on their own accord, which is why she talks about the drugs. And if, people, if they want to do these things, then that's their choice, that's their freedom. And in our conversation with Roger, he talks about how it should actually be our own decisions, and no one should actually be able to make those choices for us or impose legislation to make those choices for us.
Yeah, he's got a lot to say. He's really outspoken. I was pretty impressed by his level of eloquence on this subject of human rights, especially in light of that sort of libertarian movement, of which I'm learning more and more.
Well, he's been a libertarian for some time, and can you hear that rain? Oh, yeah. My God. There's a bit of a cleanse for us. The story that I was reading about Roger, he was eating a bowl of Wheaties apparently in 2011, and he was listening to a podcast, believe it or not, called Free Talk Live about this new currency. And he had this interest that sort of swept all over him. He was a libertarian at this time, and it was at that moment that he became a supporter of cryptocurrencies. And so I guess he felt some sort of alignment with Ross, considering they had a lot of things in common.
He mentions that in the interview. He said he didn't actually know Ross before this whole Free Ross campaign came to be, but that in hearing his story realised that there were quite a few parallels. In fact, he also spent time in a federal prison, so I think there are some parallels between their experiences. In the meantime, we would like to welcome you to Crypto Clothesline. Our show is about helping women join the blockchain wealth revolution for themselves and their families.
Our names are Amy-Rose-Goodey and abheeti-kathryn-pass, and we're speakers in blockchain and crypto, and we're on a mission.
We're learning together with you. We're talking with leading experts in the space. We're exploring cutting-edge technology projects that are shaping the future for our children.
And this podcast is for intelligence and growth and our values of peace, harmony, and collaboration with the planet.
We are user-supported, and we're providing quality and fun content for you, just like our mate Andreas Antonopoulos. So please, go and support us on Patreon.
Our mate. Oh, we're so close.
Now, where can our people find us on Patreon?
Go to our website, cryptoclothesline.com/Patreon, or you can actually Google search Patreon Crypto Clothesline, or you can email me and I'll send you the link, or you can write me a letter and then I'll write down the link in a letter. Or there's these pigeons and you can actually tie a little note to their foot, just gently, and just tell it to go to Amy Rose, and you'll find me that way.
Or if you're a bit more upbeat and you're a bit of a Harry Potterite, then you could also get an owl and do the same thing.
Or if you like, we can also practice our telepathy. I can send you a message like that too. Just go to Patreon.
The final option is just to go to the show notes. On that note, let's have a listen to our conversation with Roger Ver.
Thank you so much, Roger Ver, for joining us on the Crypto Clothesline today. It's a bit of a different interview because we've asked you to come on and support the interview that we've done for Lyn Ulbricht and her plight to free Ross with the Free Ross campaign. So thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us about this.
Yeah, glad to do whatever I can to help at this point.
We recently had a lengthy interview with Lyn Ulbricht of Free Ross campaign. Obviously, that's Ross Ulbricht's mother, for listeners who aren't familiar. We were really interested, Roger, to be able to speak to you because one of the questions we put to Lyn was what sort of support she's had from within the crypto community, the crypto blockchain community. And she spoke extremely highly of you, and she talked about, in terms of your personal connection, how you were helping her with tweets and learning how to use Twitter, but also on a much deeper level, how you created different campaigns that were incentivizing listeners and people on Twitter to actually contribute to the Free Ross campaign. And we just wondered if you could talk about that a little bit more deeply.
Yeah, well, to be honest, I wasn't the only person. We have a whole team of passionate people at Bitcoin.com that helped me with that. And the vast majority of us are philosophically aligned with the idea that we own our ourselves, and we own our own bodies, and we don't need a bunch of people bossing us around in regards to what we can or can't put in our own bodies. And I think Ross is of a similar mindset there. And as someone who's been in federal prison myself, I saw exactly how these people get treated simply for acting like they own themselves, which they do own themselves. In the particular prison I was in, it wasn't nearly as rough of a one that Ross is in, but somewhere between 70 and 80% of the people were there for victimless crimes, which for the most part meant buying, selling, or using drugs. And from my point of view, if there's no victim, there's no crime. Other than maybe the only crime that's being committed is the people that's imprisoning those people that haven't committed a crime. If you're locking people in a cage for having possessed or used or sold or smoked a plant or something else that makes people feel happy, it's the police, the judges, the lawyers, and prosecutors that are prosecuting those people and locking them in prison. Those are the bad people. Those are the ones that are committing a crime. And so my heart goes out to all these people. It's not just Ross. He's one of literally millions of people who's imprisoned for having committed no crime against any victim whatsoever. His only crime was disobedience against the state. If anything, I think disobedience against the state is a virtue, not a crime. I just want to let my voice be heard in regards to that. If nobody speaks out, who else? So the more of us that speak out, the better. And I'm lucky enough at this point in my life to have a bit of a platform. So I want to use that platform to spread the ideas that are important to me. Mainly self-ownership and the non-aggression principle, and live and let live. Mind your own business if you're not hurting anybody else.
Thank you. I loved that. So, Roger, I've heard you use quite a poetic phrase, actually. Bitcoin is kryptonite to the state. And I'm just wondering, apart from all the other reasons why the state likes to control and suppress us, do you think that Bitcoin is the reason why they're using Ross as an example, because they would like to squash cryptocurrency as well?
That may be part of it, but if you look at it, the thing that makes the state the most angry is disobedience. I mean, think about it. So like if you're a mass murderer and you kill a whole bunch of people, the punishment for that, maybe you'll get the death penalty. Lots of times you just wind up with life in prison. And there's not too many crimes in which you'll get the death penalty from the state. But one of the ones that you are likely to get the death penalty from the state is treason. And treason is simply disobedience to the state, not being allegiant to your particular state. And why on earth is treason a crime that's punishable by death? It just seems absolutely insane to me, yet it is. I think Ross wasn't obedient to the state. If you read some of the things that he's accused of writing, and to this day I don't know if he's the one who wrote them or not, but I remember reading the terms of service and some of the letters from the Silk Road talking about this isn't just an online commerce website or something. This is a global revolt. And I feel that Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and the internet, it really is. It's a global revolt, not in any sort of violent way. And it's just a global revolt in the sense that now we're building the tools in which individuals have the ability to tell the state, no, you don't own me. You don't own my life. I own myself. Leave me alone. And that's what I'm busy, working to promote each day and build those tools. And tens of thousands, if not even more, other people around the world are busy building those tools. And locking Ross in jail for the rest of his life until he dies hasn't stopped it one bit. There's more darknet markets than ever before, selling more things than ever before. But if you look at the ones that are out there now, they're much less philosophically pure. The Silk Road specifically forbade anything being allowed to be sold that sole purpose was to harm others, whereas now a lot of these darknet markets just allow anything. And that's really disappointing. As somebody who wants everybody to deal with everybody on a voluntary basis. If you're busy selling stolen credit cards, that's not the right thing to do. So, of course, I'm opposed to people selling stolen stuff or things that sole purpose is to hurt others. But the Silk Road didn't allow any of that sort of thing.
And so, for example, Lyn Ulbricht is looking to have this petition signed by which she's hoping to get 500,000 signatures. And I believe they're up around 83,000, perhaps more by now. How likely do you feel it is, having been through that system yourself and having these not only strong ideas, but having had these really unpleasant experiences? How likely do you think it is that Donald Trump would recognize that pardon, given that it would give him some sort of affiliation to condoning crypto/the dark net, the dark web?
To be honest, I really don't know. I'm always an eternal optimist. I always hope for the very, very, very best in everything, but plan for the worst case scenario. And, it's not too often that presidents give out pardons, but maybe it's possible. And having 500,000 signatures certainly would be a good start. It certainly isn't going to hurt anything. And I was one of the very first people to sign that petition. And I urge anybody else that winds up listening to this podcast, if you haven't signed it already, please go and sign it and then share the link to that petition with your friends and family and ask them to sign it too, because that's the only way we'll ever get to 100,000 and then 500,000. And who knows? Someday maybe we'll even get 1 million signatures on that. But hopefully Ross will be released long before then. But before Ross is released, please sign the petition and ask your friends and family to sign it too.
Ross built this website. It was basically an e-commerce website, and now he's serving a double life sentence plus 40. And this is extreme. And Lyn talked about this. See, what I can't figure out, and I'd like your insight on this, is even if they did want to make an example out of him, even if some of the things they said he did, why did they impose such an incredibly harsh penalty? Like, what do you think the reason is, given that there appears to be some underlying reason that we aren't aware of?
Disobedience is the biggest crime against the state. And, Judge Forrest is an evil, evil person. What else can you say about somebody that wants to condemn someone to die in prison for having built an e-commerce website? She is evil. Just like the guards in the concentration camps in Nazi Germany were evil, or the judges that sent people there were evil. The worst atrocities to all of humankind were done with the full and complete blessing of the law. What's happened to Ross is absolutely a travesty, and it's been done with the full and complete blessing of the law. And the people that are enforcing these horribly immoral laws are, at the very, very least, misguided. And if you want to take a stronger stance, you can say that they're evil for having done so.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Roger. And we finally got together. We had a few hiccups along the way between international time zones and other things, family members and kids coming and going. So we thank you most sincerely for coming on and making these useful and sort of prominent comments in regards to this human rights issue. And
I thank you both for continuing to try and make the world a better place through education and awareness. So thank you both for that.
I was really impressed listening to Roger. I was sort of starting to get the impression that I was talking to someone far, far, far more clever than myself, and that doesn't happen very often.
I actually think he's a bit of a genius, but he does have that background in economics.
I really enjoyed the conversation. I was really pleased that somebody who's got such a big name in the crypto field made himself available to have a conversation with us in regards to the Free Ross campaign. It's obviously something that he cares deeply about, and he was really outspoken.
Yeah, much gratitude to Roger for coming on. He has been supporting the Free Ross campaign for some time now. I think it's just one little extra thing that he can do. I think it's something that's close to his heart, and he appears to be in this lifetime on a mission to create a free world.
Well, he's definitely somebody who's walking the walk, not just talking the talk. He's renounced his American citizenship. He's living in another country. He's taken some fairly intense steps to protect and maintain and uphold his personal freedoms.
Yeah, he's a pretty tough guy.
All right, well, let's move on to listening to part 2 of our conversation with Lyn Ulbricht. And how has this affected you as a family? Do you feel like it's brought you closer together in supporting each other? I mean, I look at my kids and there's so much sibling bickering that goes on. And sometimes I'm imagining an experience this profound. How has that affected your family life?
It's really been hard, honestly. The kind of stress that we've been living under makes it very difficult. I mean, we're all pulling together, but at the same time, it's really hard. It's hard to be so stressed out. I'm trying not to be, but it's difficult. I mean, now I have to worry about Ross's safety again. It's difficult. So I would say it takes a really bad toll on families, and staying together is difficult. It's not easy at all. And I've talked to other people the same thing. So, and also it's hard on families. My husband and I have an internet business, so we have flexibility and we can kind of move temporarily. It's not easy, but we do it. But other people can't. And so I've talked to so many people. I ran into a woman. I actually knew her from New York when Ross was there, and here she was in Colorado. And I'm like, oh my God, we're running in the same circles, unfortunately. But anyway, she hadn't seen her husband since last December, because she couldn't afford it. She couldn't afford to come out from the East Coast to Colorado. And I don't think that's taken into consideration. It's kind of like they don't care about the kids, about the families. And it's very hard on families in general. It's just tough. Plus there's a financial burden, and because of lawyers and everything. And it's really kind of unbelievable what people go through.
It's emotional, it's financial, it's psychological, it's stressful.
Mental. Yes, absolutely. You're right.
And
Physical.
how has it been on you physically?
I almost died. Literally I almost died. I came within minutes of my heart just giving out.
Because you were so stressed?
Well, they said it was this thing called broken heart syndrome, which affects the left ventricle of your heart. And it was after the trial and the sentencing, and my heart gave out. It's just, I'm okay now, but yeah, it's like seeing your child killed in front of you, murdered in front of you. But the thing is, they're still alive. So there is no closure. You still have to fight for them because they're suffering all the time. Not that, hey, I losing a child, if a child dies, you never get over that either. So it's there with you anyway. It's analogous, except I guess you could say that I get to see him and I have hope, but it's pretty rough.
My son has been at the brunt of sort of passive aggressive bullying at school, and that has taken me through hell and high water as a mother. And do I stick up for him? Do I let him learn his own independence? How do I do this? And I can only imagine it's like that on uber steroids for you and your situation.
Yeah, that's tough though. How old is your son?
13.
Yeah, it's a tough age too.
Oh, God.
Yeah, no, it's tough. It's basically the bottom line is when your child is suffering, you're suffering. You cannot be happy. You can't really be at peace and at rest. And people say, well, how do you keep going? I'm like, what am I supposed to do? Just say, okay, bye, Ross. See ya. Too bad. So sad. I'm going off and having, pursuing my bliss. I don't know. What am I supposed to do? I can't leave him to rot in prison. I can't. It's just, I'm incapable of doing it, and so I just, every day, there's an interesting saying, a friend of mine, she said she had to deal with the government too. She actually won, and she gives me hope. But in any case, she said there's a saying called turtling forth, which is like a turtle. You kind of next step, the next step, the next step, every day you just take the next step. And I'm like, that's what I do. That's exactly what I do. So it's like, okay, what's next? Okay, I'll handle it. Now I handle it. Now, and you just keep turtling forth. And also remember, this too shall pass with your son. This too shall pass.
That's my favorite saying.
Yeah.
That's my favorite saying.
Yeah.
That is definitely her saying, and also because it's her last name.
Yeah. I hated my last name until I realized what a gift it was when I heard some beautiful saying like that.
Yeah. But it is hard no matter what your kids are going through. And it's hard for them to understand. Well, I'm not talking about your son now. It's like it's hard for them to understand this too shall pass. Because to them, it seems like this is everything, and it's not.
Yeah.
We all know 13, isn't. Thank God, right? 13 is a tough age. And my daughter's much nicer to me now than when she was 13. But I won't embarrass her any more than I am.
Well, my mum was probably listening to me saying, gee, she turned out okay. She was a jerk when she was, because I was not cool.
Right.
I was not
Well, it's hormone poisoning, right? My daughter said, she said, Mom, I realized I was being really mean to you, but I just couldn't help it. So I'm like, yeah, I know.
What a cop-out.
Well, she was already nice. She was already in her 20s, She's like, I just couldn't help it. In a way,
I moved away from my mother for 10 years, and I really just needed to work through some stuff. And I realized that we both had our issues, but I literally moved to the other side of the world. And it was like largely because I had to sort out who I was outside of the shadow of this very strong personality. And when I came back, we sat down and had a glass of wine. And I went, Mum, I'm so sorry for all the shit I put you through. And she looked at me with the most beautiful, loving expression. She goes, it's all right, my darling. You're my daughter. We really are so forgiving.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even a teenager when I ran away from home. I was like in my 30s by then. I was like, I'm out of here.
No, it's being a mother and a parent. Father makes you very vulnerable, right? So you can't give up on your kids, though. They're part of your cells. So it's just you can't do it. It's very sad though, because a lot of people come up to me and say, my mom would never do this for me. And I'm like, yeah, they would. But, the truth is a lot of people can't either. I do have a big mouth, which is finally going to some good use. And, seriously, it's like, and I'm educated. A lot of the people who are in there, they're not educated. They can't communicate in the same way. It's like, it's the skills too. But then others are just like, hey, you screwed up, done. I want nothing more to do with you. And they write them off. But others say, yeah, my mom would do this too. So it's an interesting mix.
Lyn, you mentioned earlier that you have a network of influencers and supporters in the crypto space who are on board and on the journey with you trying to free Ross. Can you tell us about some of these people and your relationship with Roger Ver and some of the other people? I've seen a lot of names on the website. So can you tell us about the other people who are supporting you?
Sure. Well, Roger stepped up several years ago. He's very creative about how he has helped us. So I had tweeted a picture of Ross in prison, and Roger took that picture and said, if he's innocent, he needs our help. If he's guilty, he's a hero, or something like that. And I will give $10 for every time this is retweeted. And he ended up giving us $160,000. And it really got us through the trial. And I mean, it was so great, but he did it in a way that also amplified the message and, got a lot of attention, not just writing me a check type thing. And then later when he matched the funds on the Free Rossathon, it just boosted the event. And so he's been, steadfastly supportive and outspoken. He's very much against the drug war. He spent time in prison himself. It was 8 months or something like that. And so he has some experience with what it's like. So he's been great. He and Ross have corresponded, and he's been a true friend. And he's also advised me on things, like he helped me back in the early days. He said, listen, when you tweet, you need to put a hashtag something and tag people. I was like, oh, okay. Anyway, he was very helpful. And
that's the millennials stepping up, isn't it? It's millennials stepping up into what they're brilliant at, social media.
But for me, it's like learning a foreign language as an adult, right? I'll never be fluent as they are. I don't think I'll never, with my phone or any of that stuff. It's like, oh God, this is always going to be a foreign language to a certain extent. But anyway, I'm learning it. I'm getting better. And then Eric Voorhees came and visited Ross. He's, Shapeshift. And he's one of the early people in Bitcoin. And he, spoke out for Ross's petition. Really nice guy, very supportive, there when we need him. Charlie Lee of Litecoin, I have not met yet. I'm going to be at a conference with him so I can thank him in person for stepping up and saying, hey, I learned about Bitcoin from an article about Silk Road and we need to let him out. And that's the whole point. Who knows if Litecoin would even exist, if Bitcoin would even exist. It was really for Ross about an idea. It was about a platform and an idea. It wasn't about drugs. He didn't care about drugs. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be a drug kingpin and I'm going to make all this money. And, the guy lived with 3 roommates. He didn't even have a car. That was not what he was focused on. It wasn't money and power. And, I think there's very few drug kingpins who care about voluntary interaction, and not using force. But they smeared him with that. And they also piled on with that because Ross wouldn't plead guilty. And they originally, that wasn't part of the charges, and they threatened him with it. Then they added it, the prosecutors. It gave him he gave him 2 life sentences instead of 1, and a mandatory minimum of 20 years. But of course, the mandatory minimum didn't matter because the judge went way past the mandatory minimum. She said, I'm going to give you the harshest penalty I possibly can. And luckily, they didn't have the death penalty. I mean, she would have done that. She basically said she would. She also is very antagonistic. Well, the whole thing was about Bitcoin, I think. Senator Chuck Schumer from New York came out again. He said, this Silk Road's got to be taken down. We've got to take down Bitcoin. Well, he was on the Senate Finance Committee. He was on the Banking Committee, and he's very in with financial powers. And I think they were very worried about this. What do you mean there's this all other currency that we have no control over, and what is this thing? And I think it's very obvious from the other sentences that it wasn't about drugs, because the biggest drug seller on Silk Road got 10 years, and it goes down from there. This Bitcoin thing, I think, was very alarming to them, and I think that's why they went after him so hard.
If you were going to sort of spell it out for someone at a bus stop, what are the key legal issues that you're challenging with this? Because I've read about the fact that 2 of the police, the people that were
federal agents,
that they've ended up in prison too. So can you sort of give a bullet point list of exactly what the challenges are?
About those agents, it's not only that they used their access to Silk Road to steal over $1 million, but they had access to the site and they could act as DPR, the handle of the person running it, who I think there were many. They could change what was on there in terms of chats and things that are written on the site, or they could delete. And by the way, well, I'm not really answering your question, but let me digress for a second. It was discovered after trial in the evidence that some evidence had been tampered with and deleted. And it was also discovered that Dread Pirate Roberts logged in to the Silk Road Forum after Ross was already in solitary. So it wasn't Ross. Who was it? I think, I try to just say, first of all, excessive sentencing. The sentence should fit the crime. The trial had many due process violations. So that the trial itself is a problem. The illegal surveillance and the lack of search warrants where the government can now just come in and surveil all of our internet activity and scarf it up and use it how they wish, without a warrant, without oversight, in secret, as they did to Ross. But this was before the Supreme Court in Ross's case, and the Supreme Court chose not to address it. So we're all still vulnerable that way. And, of course, officials can be blackmailed by what's on the internet, what they put on the internet, or who knows what all they could find out. At least they should get a warrant. The fact that the judge could use uncharged, unproven allegations that were never ruled on by a jury, and that is the Constitution, to enhance this sentence.
So she was basically abusing power.
Totally abusing power, in my opinion, yes.
I mean, the judge was so harsh and emotional and unjustified. I mean, considering the evidence tampering and the fact that no harm was done or proven to anybody, it just seems so hostile.
She's very hostile to the whole thing, and I don't think it was just because of drugs. She was very hostile to the philosophy behind the site, and even said at sentencing, "We know you started this site for philosophical reasons, and I'm not sure that's a philosophy you've left behind. And it is troubling and dangerous." And so she's going to put Ross away for his philosophy. That is basically, his ideas, his philosophy, his political beliefs, which of course is a violation of freedom of speech. And it's not allowed to be used in sentencing, but she got away with it so far.
Is this basically like an anti-terrorism campaign? Is this like the whole 9/11 sort of fever being reignited in this situation?
It's interesting. I mean, thank God they haven't thrown terrorism at him, at least, because they smeared him with everything else. But their methods, it's a good point.
I was at a get-together recently, and I was talking about the fact that I was really excited about meeting with you. And there was a guy that I didn't know, and I tweeted this, and I think you commented on it. But there was a guy that I didn't know at the table, and I was saying, I'm really excited, this mom and everything that you're doing. And he said, yeah, for me, the thing that happened to Ross Ulbricht was a bit like, take Mark Zuckerberg down, the Facebook, warrior, if you like, or whatever, the owner of Facebook, take him down because somebody, put some pornographic pictures up on his site. I mean, using the owner of the site and pointing the finger at that person because of the activity of other human beings on the site. Well, a whole heap of us should get thrown in jail if that's the case.
Absolutely. I mean, you can look at, Amazon was being sued by a mom whose daughter bought cyanide on Amazon and killed herself with it. And horrible thing. Jeff Bezos didn't go to court over that. Craigslist, which, do they have Craigslist in Australia?
No, something similar. We have Gumtree.
There's tons of drugs being dealt on Craigslist. Everybody knows it. There's prostitution. There's been murders, and I'm not saying, we're not, obviously you're not either saying that those people should be in court. I'm just saying Ross is being used as a scapegoat and shouldering the burden of every darknet market site that things happen. I mean, Facebook people sell drugs on.
And it's so obvious and they think no one can see, but no one does anything about it. They'd rather go after speeding tickets and crap like that.
Yeah, it's the same thing. They're not going to drag Mark Zuckerberg into court. It really sets a terrible precedent for liability on the part of website hosts.
It's really a tragic sort of marketing technique, isn't it, in a way? Like I feel like that this has been used as a way of saying, okay, if you're involved in crypto, this is potentially what's going to happen. It's all very dark and mysterious. And as you say, it almost feels like that's backfired because it's given crypto a lot more exposure and more people are jumping on it anyway. So I just wonder about that position of that judge and the other person you said who was associated. I can't remember, the senator who was on the
and
finance
Chuck Schumer recommended that judge for her position on the bench. And the lead prosecutor was Prepararo, was Chuck Schumer's special counsel for years and owed his job to Chuck Schumer. And Ross was arrested in California, but he was brought back to Schumer's state for trial. It was very political. It was a cozy little political, hatchet job.
All those sort of corporate handshakes.
So, I just don't see how he could have had a fair trial anyway. It was shocking to see it, actually. It was shocking to see that trial.
How do we, if you can tell all the listeners, the best way that we can support you? Obviously, signing the petition.
Yeah, and sharing it.
But also, how do we support Ross?
He knows all about the petition. So, I mean, he'd be very happy to see the petition growing, and it's an important tool. So signing the petition, sharing the petition, of course, there's always monetary. It's so expensive, the whole thing. If people want to donate, there's ways to do it on the site. That's always helpful. We're still paying lawyers, lots of money. If anyone has political connections, I know you're in Australia, but I'm trying to make political connections so I can get to the president or people who know him or who can educate him on this. So that'd be great. And then, writing Ross a letter or any kind of volunteer help. People have a lot of skills. So it's very easy to reach me through freeross.org, and there's lots of ways to help on freeross.org. Supporting us on social media too. Follow me. Ross has a Twitter now. That's Real Ross U. Follow him. Of course, he has more followers than I do, with 30 some odd tweets. I've been working at it for almost 5 years. He's already surpassed me, but that's good. That's fine.
How do you spell? Is it Real Ross U? Did you say?
Yeah, for Ulbricht. It's for his last name because everything else was taken. His name was taken.
Yeah.
So this is the Real Ross Ulbricht. And Real Ross Ulbricht was too long, and I think, or something. I don't know. He decided on Real Ross.
Only so many characters. So I've got a question for you. When you were talking about the monetary help, have you heard of legal aid?
Legal aid?
Not legal aid, but this one is legaler aid.
Oh no, I haven't.
It is it's a guy that we interviewed, and I'll put the link in the show notes as well. And I'm going to put the link with everything else that you've mentioned. Legaler aid is spearheaded by this guy, or co-founded by this guy called Stevie Giassi, and it's all about basically crowdfunding legal issues. Amy-Rose, you're probably the best to describe exactly what it does.
Yeah, so it's a blockchain-based legal system where people can, like abheeti says, crowdfund. You can put your case up there and the community can fund that. Otherwise, via tokens and things like that, and you can accumulate tokens. But otherwise, there's also going to be an abundance of pro bono lawyers who specialize in different areas. And in Australia, there's a whole bunch of lawyers who are jumping on board because disrupting the legal industry over here is pretty big at the moment. So there's going to be a lot of pro bono, and he is planning on going worldwide. So it sounds like perfect sort of, it could have been done earlier, but the perfect sort of relationship.
Yeah, that's wonderful. He's doing it. That's great.
Yeah. So
it sounds like a great project. Yeah.
I have one more question. Sorry, Lyn, I know you're probably really busy, but
no, I'm fine.
Your daughter's over here in Australia, and Ross was over here for a while as well in his younger days. What's the relationship over here, and do you think you'll come and visit us?
Actually, my husband and I were on our way to visit Ross and Callie, my daughter, and my husband got a burst appendix, and we canceled the trip. So I never made it so far. Callie's been saying, "You got to come and see why I love it so much," and I want to, but I've been so caught up with Ross's thing. But I do want to.
But where did the idea to come to Australia come from?
Really what happened was, my sister's stepson, who, we're all close, was living in Sydney. He married an Australian woman and was living in Sydney, and Callie went to visit him to check it out and then loved it. And then Ross was just visiting her for a few months. It's just that, she decided to go as far away from me as possible. You're talking about your mother? Yeah. I'm not sure that's why, but she couldn't have gone farther, I don't think. I think it's about as far as we can go. So.
Well, just look forward to that glass of wine. It'll be coming soon, and I reckon that your daughter would be so incredibly proud of you.
Yeah,
I'd be absolutely gobsmacked to have a mum like you.
Yeah, she and I are very close, actually. Yeah. Unfortunately, she loves it. I'm like, damn, why did I take them traveling when they were young? Everybody says, oh, take your children traveling, open there. I'm like, no, keep them home, make them afraid to travel so they'll stay by you. And that's my
just hilarious
advice. That's my advice. Because otherwise, I might end up in Sydney.
Well, my partner comes from Milan, and that's only because I went over. So I spent 10 years in Italy and then come
my
back.
favorite. Oh my gosh, that's great.
It's been close to 13 years now that we've been back. Hence the 13-year-old. You know, when he came along, we went. Yeah, so I think his parents would very strongly agree.
I'm
with
sure. You. Yeah, and their grandchild's in Australia and everything.
Well, Lyn, thank you so much for coming on the show. We hope that your message was conveyed as well as you could have hoped, and we hope that through this podcast at least we get some more people to sign the signature and support Free Ross.
Thank you. Yeah, could I just say quickly, you don't have to agree with what Ross did when he was 26 years old. I understand that, but it's the sentence. That's what we're asking to be commuted. That's what we're asking to be made more reasonable. And for a nonviolent first-time offender to get this kind of sentence when he has no victims came forward at trial, no one has claimed they were harmed by Ross. This is outrageous. This is a dangerous precedent. And we really could, please sign the petition. Please share it. Yeah, and go to freeross.org for more info. But thank you very much for having me on.
An absolute pleasure, and I've really loved us being able to explore the mama bear aspects of all of it too. It's making it very real.
Yeah, no, it has. It's been fun talking to you both. I feel like I'm just sort of hanging out with you talking. It's great.
Yeah.
Well, that's why we wanted to create this. We created this podcast so that people could learn about crypto and blockchain and the various, iterations of that in a context where it felt friendly. And, one of our things is there's no question, no dumb questions, or there's no stupid questions. Like, especially as women, we tend to feel intimidated sometimes in the tech finance circles and feel like we can't ask a question because we'll sound dumb.
Right.
5,000 years of social conditioning has not done much to help it.
Yeah. And there's a lot of talk about why aren't there more women in crypto and that sort of thing. So it's good. You're helping that along.
Thanks, Lyn.
Wow, thank you. And we're also really bad at saying goodbye because we keep dragging it out.
But anyway, well, thank you.
Thanks so much.
I hope I'll get to meet you when I come to Australia. I'll make sure and look you up.
Oh,
yeah, absolutely.
That would be wonderful. Yeah. And I say this from my heart. Lots of love.
Me too. Same to you. Lyn. Thanks a lot. Okay.
Thank you.
Talk to you later. Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, that was wonderful, Lyn. That was really wonderful.
I cried a bit at the beginning.
It was great to talk to you.
It's really
well, it is. It really is. You have to, but we had fun too, and that's in our, it's good to talk. You can't be sad all the time, or people are going to get sick. I mean, I can't be sad all the time when I speak because people are going to get very tired very quickly of being around me. Yeah. But I know I want to get the point across, but also, you have to, and Ross is always telling me, Mom, you got to take care of yourself. You got to have a good time. You got to enjoy, and when I can, like talking to you two, and we, have a nice rapport, I enjoy it. And it's like, okay, good. For these moments, I can be having a good time because that's what keeps you going, right? I mean, if you're miserable, it really depletes you. And all the time. So I grab those moments. Yeah.
And that's another manifestation. That's another, example of your incredible strength, because to be able to be kind and see the light when you're feeling, inundated with darkness is another, amazing human quality.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm working on it. Yeah. Pray about it every morning. So, yeah.
Well, anything that we can do to support you through social media and all, please tag us.
That'd be great.
And we'll do our best to. Our social circles are growing,
and I'll push it out there.
Oh, thank you, Lyn.
Definitely.
Of course. Yeah, great. Okay. Well, good to meet you, and I hope to reconnect. Bye.
Okay, so Lyn had some pretty chilling things to say. The whole illegal surveillance, the lack of search warrants, and the fact that she said the government can now just come in and survey all of our internet activity, the fact that they're able to do this without a warrant, and that they did this to Ross. It's a precedent that pretty much they can do to any of us if they like. And it's really that whole question of lacking human rights.
It's also really disturbing that a judge can abuse power like that. I mean, Lyn said that she was very hostile to the whole thing, and that she didn't think that it was just because of drugs. And you know what? I agree. We did have a conversation with Roger Ver, and he implied that it's probably not just because of the Bitcoin thing, that it wasn't just to make an example to sway people away from cryptocurrencies, but it has to be something more than just drugs. And I would love to see the truth come out eventually, how you see WikiLeaks and things like that, how the truth eventually comes out. I really do want to know what the hell is going on. It makes no sense.
Well, the whole fact that she said that the judge had a big sort of golden handshake with Senator Chuck Schumer from New York, and he was on the Senate Finance Committee, a banking committee. He had a lot of financial powers. I mean, I do wonder about the whole anti-Bitcoin sentiment, back then 5 years ago in 2013. So I'm not sure about that.
One of the things which makes my blood boil is about you can get any case, and if there's any evidence tampering or if there's any doubt, that term beyond reasonable doubt, like, does that even come into play with this case? Because there was proof of evidence tampering.
There are two investigators from the case who've landed themselves in prison for stealing his Bitcoin, for God's sake.
And there was also proof that there were multiple people behind the dreaded Pirate Rogers accounts, the DPR accounts. So yeah. I'm confused, and I need some sort of, closure as to what the hell is going on. What do you think's going on?
My sense is that there are so many interweaving factors, and it's not just straightforward. I think that it really depends on what you've read about it. Certainly people who found out that we've interviewed Lyn have been giving me some pretty vehement feedback on what they think happened, because they've clearly read information. So I think it depends on what you've read, and I couldn't say that I feel clear about it one way or another. What I feel clear about, though, is in speaking to Lyn, she's saying, I don't condone what was happening on the site. What she's talking about is human rights in terms of a fair trial, a real trial, and just services, like a judicial system which is actually serving a person. And she mentions in the interview, yes, Ross is her son, and Ross is the one that she's hotly defending, but she said she met literally hundreds of families that people are in for a 25-year sentence or a life sentence for dealing in marijuana. Now, I don't know about your circles, but I reckon a lot of the people that I rub elbows with would end up in prison with a 25-year or a life sentence, because there are a lot of people enjoying that recreational drug. And the fact that it seems to be teeming with contradiction. And then there are all the strands that are woven underneath, like the handshake between the judge and the senator, and the anti-Bitcoin sentiment at the time, and all sorts of other aspects that I can't even begin to gather together. It feels like it's a lot more than what we understand.
Well, there's multiple reasons why there was corruption, abuse, and violations in the whole case. So usually, if there's even one of those things, it should be thrown out. And I'm not a lawyer, and there's probably lawyers that will be going, oh, you don't know everything, you don't. But come on, there's like one thing after the other. It's unfair.
I would love to see if Legal Aid can help out with this. I know we talked about it at the end of the interview, but I think that's one platform that perhaps, that sort of crowdfunding for legal help on the blockchain, that could actually be a really positive option for Ross and for Lyn.
Even on their site, they're still saying, we need your help. So they're in a David and Goliath situation, and they can't do it alone. So I think Legal Aid would be amazing. So let's get back to Ross Ulbricht and how you can support him, how you can find the Free Ross campaign, how you can contribute, how you can volunteer even. You just need to go to freeross.org. There's a banner up the top that says help us bring Ross home, sign the petition, which you can do there. You can also donate cryptocurrency if you head down to the bottom of the website. There's a few different ways that you can support him, and we did talk in the interview about how you can even write letters.
Yeah, that would be amazing. I think it would be really cool to write some letters ourselves and to take a photograph of those and hopefully see whether they get received. But also don't forget about sharing it. So sharing the petition in your local network so that this information can go further and further.
All you need to do is there's a tab on the website. It's on the freeross.org website. And if you click on the Take Action tab, there's a few different things. You can email info@freeross.org. And Lyn actually gets back to you really fast if you email her there. If you want to support in any way, she's open to that. And also if you want to volunteer, that's also on the Take Action page and as well as Ross's address.
Now, I know you're not supposed to have two calls to action, but I'm just going to pop this in here. We are a user-supported platform. We provide quality and fun content for you. And if you care to support us, please go to Patreon on our website. You'll see the Patreon tab. Or you can also go to the show notes, and that's another way of making sure that we can continue bringing you this quality content. Well, Amy Rose, this has been a heart-wrenching two-part series with Lyn Ulbricht. We really both want to see her succeed and get to that 500,000. So we look forward to seeing a surge in the number of signatures on the petition and the number of shares as a result of our podcast contribution.
I certainly hope so. And we are going to be writing a letter, or a few letters actually, to Ross. And if he writes back, we will share it with the rest of our audience and keep you in the loop. We will also continually check the numbers on the petition and keep you updated. So yeah, just check in sometimes with the Crypto Clothesline and we'll keep you updated.
Thanks so much for listening, and we will talk next week.
Bye, Beatty.
Bye, darling. Bye. Hi, you've called abheeti
And Amy Rose
at Crypto
Clothesline.
Leave a message after the
beep. Okay, 3, 2, 1, ready?
It's all very fine and dandy that you think that women should be included in this crypto and blockchain information. I just think that you might be a little mistaken again. Frankly, I don't think women care about this stuff, and we've got more important things to be thinking about. I mean, women's proper role is taking care of washing and making sure that the clothes are folded and the floors are clean. I would hate to imagine the state of your homes. I can only think that if you ladies think that you're modern women, that somehow you think you're above all those simple womanly tasks. I would very much appreciate you ladies just giving up the ghost on this whole bring women to the front rubbish.
Crypto clothesline.